everyone. So I thought today I'd just give you a little bit of insight into me. I'm very new to the group, to get to know who I am. I guess it started at this picture back in April 2000. And, oh, am I using the clicker? Yeah. And which way? This way? Yeah. I gave birth to my daughter at that time, and I have to say honestly it was like a baby giving birth to a baby. I'm still very green in the world, and I'd just given birth and they put her in my arms, and I don't know where this came from, but I got this impression, and this almost like something was holding me still at that time. And I got a voice in my head that said, the sins of the father get passed to the son. It's really interesting to think that I'm in shock. I just had this child, and that's the message that was swirling around me at that point. And I knew in an instant, just with those words, that my role here was to deal with everything that I had been through up until that point, and to be able to put it aside, put it to rest, because if I didn't, this child was going to have and inherit everything that I had been through. So, as I said, I was very green. I graduated high school, thought everybody was Catholic. So that's how green I was. So this became my first decision, my first critical decision as a parent. And then some months down the track, and I was grappling with motherhood, and I heard of this experiment. And the experiment talked about two groups of worms, Group A and Group B. And what they did is they took Group A and they taught it how to do something, these scientists. And when they were satisfied that Group A of worms knew how to do this thing, they mashed them up and they fed them to Group B. And what they discovered really astounded them. They discovered that Group B, without being taught what Group A had been taught, inherently knew what Group A had been taught. And this is a lesson in terms of what we pass down, but also what gets inherited by osmosis, whether we're teaching it deliberately to our children or we're just role modeling it. And I took that on board as the basis for how I was going to do parenting. So I decided I was going to conduct this experiment on my child and become the best version of me that I could be, so that by the time she was my age, and I was 23 at the time, that I could look at her and she would go further faster. That was the premise, that if I could turn myself inside out, deal with all my stuff, she would go further faster. And the hypothesis was that by the time she was 23, she would not be where I was at that point. She would be much further down the track. Also at that time, I got into personal development. Do you know this guy?
Yes.
Yeah, Jim Rohn. And I listened to Jim Rohn religiously, and he has this thing about having a philosophy of your life. And I decided I was going to put together a philosophy of parenting, because that was my world at that point. So I came up with 5 principles, and 2 of them were around communication. So really instilling in this child the ability to communicate and to be very articulate. And the second one was being able to ask for help, because I grew up in Mauritian culture. It's all about looking good. We don't want the Joneses knowing what's going on. And it's the stiff upper lip, it's the equivalent of that. So that meant that even as a young mum, the world thought I was perfect, but inside I was crumbling. I was a mess, but I couldn't ask for help because I had been grown up in this environment where you just didn't do that. So I made a deliberate decision. I was gonna cultivate that in this child, So they were my 3 critical decisions that I made around parenting. Then, so we were going through life. I actually embarked on a massive personal development journey. So I've been doing personal development for the last 25 years of my daughter's life, and really turning myself inside and out. And as you can imagine, as you're going on that journey, the people who are around you are also invariably going on that journey. So I'm having conversations with her about choice and consequence. And that was from a very early age. So even at 9, she dropped her Nintendo because the Nintendo Extra Large was being advertised on TV, and the extra large was 2 millimeters bigger than the one that she had. But because the marketing was so good, she didn't know that, and she was 9 at the time. So went out to the car, dropped her Nintendo, broke it into pieces, and she looked at me, and I was like, well, you know, subconsciously, you've manifested this situation to get yourself another Nintendo. Guess what, kid? It's not happening. So off for, you know, a year before she got another Nintendo. Now, here's the thing about life lessons, right? And as you're growing and you're teaching your kids, you don't know what's going to stick. Like, you don't know what incidences your kids are going to encounter with you, good, bad, indifferent, that actually stick. I know for a fact that that moment, that's stuck with that child. And she gets marketing now like not many people her age. So she can see what the manipulation and the tools that marketers are using to hook you into certain things, to buy certain things, and she doesn't subscribe to that model. But as she was growing up, what I realized as I'm talking to her friends, you know, she had a child around, like, she was 12 at the time. She had kids in her class who were self-harming, who were cutting, who were not good. And these were kids who were coming from, in my eyes and from where I come from, very well-to-do families. And I suddenly realized that trauma looks different for different people. There's no one definition of trauma. And I realized, you know, for myself, that I couldn't compare my trauma to somebody else's and say, oh, well, you know, I was more traumatized than you ever were, right? And it was a really valuable lesson to understand that, and that the generations that we grow up in contextualized, you know, how we see the world, how we experience the world. So for us, you know, what was traumatizing for us, for our generation, and then you look at the previous generations and what they went through versus what young people are going through now, it's all contextualized within that sort of environment, I suppose, and what's going on. I also realized that breaking the cycle won't happen in one generation. So even though I had made that decision at the very beginning, and made some fantastic headway, there were things that my daughter will now have to carry on if she chooses to continue that for the future generations. And I also realized that generational stories, whether it's trauma, whether it's gifts and talents, whatever it is, we've got libraries that get passed down from one generation to the next. But often they're invisible, but they're the contexts that shape our lives. So there are things that are shaping our lives and how we are and who we are in the world that we're not even conscious of because they've been passed down in our lineage. You know, and it's not necessarily something we talk about often. So it's these kinds of frameworks that I bring into the work that I'm doing when I do work with young people. It's a big part of the reason why I don't subscribe to, oh, this generation and blah, blah, blah. It's because I'm looking at the context that they're growing up in, the world that they're growing up in, and then taking a holistic view in terms of how do we help this young person move forward in their lives. And a big part of my why is that, you know, through my own journey, I've learnt to develop a mental resilience that I think most people would, without trying to big note myself, but be on their knees about if they encountered what I had gone through. And I look at young people who don't have that mental agility, who don't have that mental strength to like deal with whatever life is throwing at them, and they're doing things like committing suicide. I mean, just last year I had someone in my family do that, you know, and they were 24 years old. That's a whole life that has not been lived. So that's my biggest why for what I do. And I guess the turning point was, I've been in Gold Coast for 3 years, and about 2 years ago I met this lady. She was about 76, let's say. And she said to me, Jenny, I spent my whole life getting over my childhood. And I felt this little twinge in my heart because I knew that pinnacle decision I made over 25 years ago changed the trajectory of my life. Because in that moment, I got to see myself in that lady. And if I hadn't made the decisions that I'd made, that would have been me, you know? So my goals are to share what I've learnt with another generation. I've raised my daughter. I can say that the experiment was successful. She's got her SHIT together, and she's on her way. And I feel like if I can help other kids go further faster, then I'm fulfilling my mission on this planet. And also to give kids an alternative option for what they're doing. So so just to share a couple of stories with you, for me, sometimes it's about talking to parents, sometimes I had a conversation with a mother just recently, and her daughter is wanting to do performing arts, and the mother and father, they're coming from sort of the Malaysian context. A lot of times migrant families want their kids to become doctors, lawyers, that career path, and realized that there was a disconnect between what success is defined as. So the kids, like, there's more than one way to skin a cat. Parents are like, you have to go down this model. And then it was like, well, let's have a conversation about what is success and how do we define success from each perspective, so then we can build a bridge to come together and meet somewhere in the middle. And some of the students that I've worked with, I've worked with young people who came here, again, as migrants, can't get a job, are dealing with all sorts of stuff. One young guy, he was 4 weeks into the semester before he came up to me and said, I'm really shy, I can't get a job, I need some help. And I just gave him one tip, right? One tip was to go to Coles, talk to the checkout person, say, hey, how are you today? That's it. So he did that every day for a week. And the Coles manager somehow noticed him and said, mate, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, look, I'm really shy. I'm just practicing my people skills, talking to people. Anyway, they got chatting. Turns out there was a job in Fremantle where he could be flipping burgers, and off he went. He got a job just doing that. So really just getting people out of their comfort zone and giving them an alternate way to think about things. So I've told you before, I'm running these cash flow nights, or these cash flow games events, and it's really, this is the foray into teaching financial literacy. We're also looking at things like emotional literacy for kids. It's very non-confrontational, and in a lot of ways they're teaching themselves. And I've got some great mentors like Gordon and Mal who come in and support. So that's a little bit about me, and thank you for listening, guys.